Yep.
You want to do a roll call then?
Supervisor Galloway,
Present.
Supervisor Pruitt,
Present.
Mr. Smith, Supervisor O'Brien, Supervisor Goolsby,
Present.
Mr. Higgins,
Present.
Supervisor Barlow, Supervisor Woodward,
Here.
Supervisor Reed, Supervisor Rutherford,
Alright.
Commissioner Duranzio,
Hello.
Counselor Payne.
Here. Everyone participating electronically, and we can move on to matters from the public. Is there anyone who are online or in person who would like to make a public comment? Seeing nobody, I will close public comment and move on to presentations. Our first presentation, 2026 General Assembly preview.
Hi, Mr. Chairman and members of the commission. I want to let you know that I wore my festive tie and my jacket today, attempting to influence the vote, because that's what I do, right? So mine is the winning vote. That they sure was. But let's talk about legislation and the upcoming General Assembly session. This 2020 General Assembly session will be a long session, which is a 60-day session on the next slide. It will convene on January 14th. This is going to be probably seem longer than usual because the Constitution provides that the session convenes on the second Wednesday. The second Wednesday of January is as late as it can possibly be. So we'll go from January 14th, 60 straight days to March 14th. A lot of changes. Of course, we have a new administration. And we'll have Democrat in the governor's office as well as Democrat control of both the House and the Senate. Senate remains 21-19. They were not out for election last month. We're going to have nearly 12.5 new delegates, most of them Democrats, and you can see there the Democrats will have a pretty heavy majority as well. We're going to have kind of some cascading domino effect type elections coming. It looks like because the lieutenant governor-elect is currently in the state senate, so her resignation that triggers special elections to her seat, and 2 of the members of the House of Delegates are running for that Senate seat. And one of them, I'm going to assume will probably win. This means we'll have another special election probably sometime later on in the session. And then just one other kind of logistical thing: pre-filing of bills, which the legislators are able to do in advance of the beginning of the session, began shortly after the election, actually just a couple of weeks ago, and that will continue all the way up until the first day of the session. Next slide, please. It's going to spend a lot of time in the next several slides just talking about the state budget, because that is always one of the biggest actions that the General Assembly has to take in any given session. Coming up in about 2 weeks, a little less than 2 weeks, Governor Youngkin will introduce both amendments to the current fiscal year budget, fiscal year 26, as well as his proposed budget for fiscal year 27 and 28, the biennial budget. He does that and then he leaves office. So it's left to the General Assembly and his successor to deal with the budget proposal that's presented. State revenues so far are exceeding expectations in the current fiscal year. And just having attended the Senate Finance Committee retreat and looking at documents from the House retreat from several weeks ago, they're expecting that over the course of the next 2-year budget period, there'll be about $4 to $5 billion in additional revenue available for appropriation. Mostly as a result of revenue growth, but also some sizable carryover funds as well. And you can see there for both fiscal year 27 and 28, based on the staff analysis in the House and Senate, what they're projecting as the revenue growth for both 27 and 28. On the next slide, the first bullet there is that $45 billion sounds great, but it's probably going to be eaten up pretty quickly. You've probably been reading reports in the media required expenditures in Medicaid, $400 million additional in this fiscal year, and then another 2.8 or 27 and 28 for a total of $3.2 billion. Re-benchmarking, which is done every 2 years, K-12 education cost is gonna be either $850 to $950, depending on if you look at the House numbers and the Senate numbers at this point. Children's Services Act, I know we've talked about that every year in terms of what you all experience at the local level with increasing costs. Those are the expected state costs for the upcoming biennium, an additional 180 million. The other thing that's kind of in play, don't know how it's gonna pan out at this point, but the state will have to do, the General Assembly will have to deal with how they're going to conform to the federal tax code. If they were to do everything that they could do, then they would be looking at an additional cost of 1.1 billion. So you're doing all that math, and you can see that expected revenue that's available for appropriation in the next 2 fiscal years is going to be eaten up pretty quickly. So as I indicated, Governor Youngkin will introduce his budget proposal on December 17th. The legislators then get a chance to introduce their amendments or their proposed amendments. Yeah, the proposed budget, they can do that up until just a couple of days after the beginning of the session. And then around the middle of the session, we'll have the House version of amendments and the Senate version of amendments released. And then there will be that conference committee of senior legislators and money committees to try to iron out the differences in the budgets by the end of the session, hopefully by the end of the session in mid-March. I would expect, based on things that I'm hearing and conversations that I've had with some folks at the state, probably we'll be looking at some ways to generate some additional revenue. I've heard taxing the digital services, which they've actually done a couple of years ago. And I think actually Governor Youngkin had come back with a smaller version of that. So I would expect that to probably be at the top of the list in terms of generating some additional revenue. Next slide.
Can you explain what you mean by that? When you say taxing digital services, I actually don't know that I know what that
Yeah, so right now streaming, downloads, all those types of things, they are not taxed. They can be taxed, they're taxed in other states. And if you do that, some hundreds of millions of dollars.
That would be at the
state
based on
level.
the individual consumer level, right?
Yes. Yes, and that would all be at the state level. Yeah, I haven't really heard anything about local revenue generation. We got one, the chair of the House Finance Committee that's typically every year we'll talk tax reform, but then we don't see too much in tax reform. Yeah, I know there were some changes made back in 2020, I guess. That's when, localities were given the authority to for higher transient occupancy tax and meals tax. That's when the rest of counties outside of Arlington and Fairfax were allowed to tax cigarettes for the 5th time. That was coming up on 6 years ago. Next slide, let's talk about some of the issues that were identified by both the House and Senate Money Committee staffs that could be risk to the economy and the budget process, and things that, some of them, as you can see, a lot of them have some origins at the federal level and what may or may not happen there in terms of impacts of actions that have been taken. What would happen if there is another government shutdown? What's going to happen with the labor force, particularly given the aftermath of there being federal layoffs. I put the second bullet in there of note just to kind of emphasize what I was trying to portray earlier in terms of the available revenues and the demands on those revenues, I guess. Both of the reports that were made from the House and Senate said something similar in terms of for the upcoming biennium, identified budget needs beyond mandatory spending will only be met because of the availability of carry forward balances. That's the revenue growth projections, but then there's a lot of carryover money that is coming from fiscal year 25 into 26 that kind of inflates the budget. Makes possible some of those expenditures moving forward into the next biennium. While mandatory program increases can be met, high priority expenditures will have to be weighed and balanced against one another. So are they going to look at teacher salaries and salaries increases for state employees? what additional money, would that take, and then what other priorities would be considered for additional funding. Are there gonna be things considered that maybe we'd be trying to fill in the gaps for whatever may have been local governments or nonprofits or other organizations that have not been able to get reimbursed or have lost grants that normally have been in place. And then the final slide is just a little bit of about what we would expect legislatively outside of the budget process. Typically we see 2,000 bills introduced and then a whole bunch of resolutions in addition to that. I think certainly from the local government standpoint, the last several years when I've come and talked to you during the development of the regional legislative program, we talked a lot about land use authority. I think again we'll be on defense with that, particularly with regard to the housing arena. We saw some things last year that would have required that local governments produce housing stock at a certain rate over a 5-year period. Energy certainly is going to be a hot topic again this year. We heard that a couple of days ago at the Albemarle Board of Supervisors meeting from some of the local delegation, talking about energy on the generation side, and also looking at data centers and the demand that they're placing on the availability of energy. That will certainly be a focus. I know last year we had a lot of talk about solar and some restrictions and usurping of local government authority on solar siting. There will be one bill that is coming out of the Commission on Electric Utility Regulation. Some people call it CURE, some people call it sewer. They have recommendations. That was part of the reason I was in Richmond today. One of their bills is actually to change the name of the commission so they get away from CURE or sewer. But anyway, there is a citing bill that they endorsed, has many of the elements of a bill last year that would have set some standards for citing in the Code of Virginia related to setbacks and fencing requirements and the height of solar structures. That bill was unsuccessful this past year, but it looks like that it may be coming back again. It does state in the draft that I saw today that we're not requiring local governments to approve any application for solar. And it also would allow for localities and applicants to be able to come up with, I guess, agree to standards that are part of the proposal that are less restrictive than what the state standards would be. So I don't know what the reaction is going to be to that, from the General Assembly, to that coming from, BACO, VML, and other folks that have a lot of interest in the solar industry. But we do anticipate that and probably others in the solar realm will be out there. And again, new administration, they're going to be transitioning in. You've probably seen or heard the last several days, the governor-elect is starting to pick some secretaries who have to go through a confirmation process at the beginning of the session. There'll be directors of the agencies that will likewise also be named. This is a non-election year in terms of the state elections coming up in 2026. So for me, one of the questions is, what will they do in a non-election year that may be more challenging, that may be more controversial, that they may not want to do then the following year when all 140 members of the legislature will be up for election. So, again, budget, always a top priority. Energy, as we talked about, tax reform, we'll see. There certainly will be proposals to address housing affordability. There's been a lot of talk here in the past week about finally getting some legislation related to retail market for cannabis over the final hurdle. And then certainly we're anticipating that there will be some transit funding discussions. I think primarily driven Northern Virginia and some commitments that the state will be facing in terms of WMATA, which is their regional transit service in that. And I think that was the last slide. It was, so that's a lot in a short period of time. Glad to take any questions.
What are some of the carryovers
Carryovers?
that we're attributing to the large balance of trust funds?
The biggest chunk of it relates to, I don't know specifically in the areas, but you may remember that there were a significant number of vetoes that Governor Youngkin submitted last year, both in budget and budget items. I think probably 800 million of this running is moving for at least, yeah, across the different areas. During the session, I will be, as in past, producing a newsletter. It's roughly every 7 to 10 days. Try to time it out around, beginning the session when a lot of the bills are coming in, making sure that there's something out fairly quickly. That middle point of the session when we've got the 2 budget proposals coming out, when we get to the crossover, which is kind of the halfway point procedurally with regard to legislation, still alive and it can be considered in the second half of the session. But certainly don't hesitate if you have a question about anything to email me or text me or give me a call. There are a number of local initiatives that I'll also be working on, not so much in the legislative, but more so on the budget side. So we'll see what we can do. I know Mike's going to be down there with me too.
Not this year.
I mean, I don't know how much you were joking. I do have other things to do.
It's always good to see you.
Well, I was down there a lot last
I
time.
know.
You were helping me.
No,
You didn't.
you were not my client.
Fire did you got?
He was down there very faithfully last year.
I know.
You could have been my
You could have helped.
client. Are there any other questions or comments from the board? No, we could move on to the next presentation, State Streets and Roads for All Implementation Funding Opportunity.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. First, I want to sincerely apologize for not being to attend in person tonight. But my name is Goran Georgievsky. I'm one of the regional planners at the TJPDC working on transportation. I will talk about tonight about a potential funding opportunity that is gonna hopefully happen in the next calendar year, so the beginning of 2026, through the Safe Streets and Roads for All program. So, as you all know, the Move Safely Blue Ridge plan was adopted by all 6 jurisdictions and as well as the TJPDC Commission. Just want to say at the start of the development of this plan, each jurisdiction made a commitment to roadway safety, and that is having the total number of fatalities and serious injuries by 2045. In the development of the process and the plan, we work very closely with staff from your local jurisdictions as well as VDOT to tailor the projects in the plan based on the needs of the jurisdictions. And then finally, with the adoption, opened the door to all of the jurisdictions to be eligible applicants for Safe Streets and Roads for All grant funding. So the projects in the plan are going to be the essential elements of how we're going to meet that commitment in the future. According to the NOFO of last year and what has happened in the past, this will be the final round of funding with approximately $1 billion available. All applicants will require a 20% non-federal match requirement. So the eligible applicants can be cities, counties, PDCs, and MPOs, with 3 available categories for implementation projects that are identified in the plan. We have spot-specific improvements or projects. We have systemic improvements and that can be applied on the entire high injury network that was identified within a specific jurisdiction. And then the policies and programs were focused on safety through examples like enforcement, emergency response, educational campaigns, and many others. The major questions that we as TJPDC staff are looking to find the answers to are if there is local interest in pursuing implementation funding available with the 2026 NOFO, and what would be the interest of the localities that the TJPDC serves as the lead applicant and supports with the administration process. So if the answer to this question is yes, then the next step for the PDC is to work with your local staff to identify the priority projects to be included in an application. We were very curious about what others have done in their application when applying for implementation projects. Specifically, we were looking at, we did some case studies and we found some results specifically looking into what kind of regional initiatives others did. So one of the important elements that we looked was if applications have supported both single and multi-jurisdictional projects. So the answer was yes, which was very good for us because as a regional body, we are very well set up to be applying for that implementation funding. The best applications align very closely with the high injury network priorities. So the high injury network is the network that shows the concentration of fatalities and serious injuries, and it is located within our Move Safely Blue Ridge plan. The projects focused on low cost, high impact needs in broad areas. And then finally, all of their localities had some kind of commitment to roadway safety. So we did 3 case studies in our research, and the first one is the Tidewater Trail corridor improvements. This is a local study. It's through the George Washington Regional Commission, where the total cost was $27 million, and they focused on key intersections with new signals and pedestrian crossing, as well as safe access to public transit. The second case study comes as a regional collaboration from the Indian Nation Council of Governments, where the applications was in partnership with 3 cities and 2 counties. This is a $26 million grant that's focused on spot-specific projects and many other systemic improvements. The third one was, I found it the most interesting, $16 million to the Denver Regional Council of Governments. It was a collaborative effort between 8 localities that had a mix of urban and rural elements. One of the major factors that they looked comprehensive approach that integrates capital investments with planning efforts to deliver long-term safety benefits across the region. This approach meant that the region doesn't just plan projects on paper and doesn't just build isolated improvements. Instead, planning and construction work together so investments are strategic, data-driven, and aligned with long-term safety goals. So this ensured for them that each dollar spent on infrastructure project supports a broader vision for safer roads rather than one-off fixes.
Excuse Lauren? Lauren, this is James Higgins. Just a minor question. What is a mast arm replacement?
Mast arm replacement. I believe that's I can't remember on top of my head what exactly it meant, but I can definitely follow up with an answer.
And this is Taylor in the back row. Typically, that's a traffic signal replacement. So sometimes you'll see like outdated red lights.
It's on an arm, not on a wire, so the mast is the pole.
Yep.
And
So
then
it's
the
that-
arm is the projector.
It's like a really
It's
big
like a
metal.
big metal thing that goes over that road.
To hold the red lights, stop lights, I guess.
Yes.
Thank you. All right, so this brings us back to Move Safely Blue Ridge, the safety action plan. As I mentioned before, we have a few categories that projects can be pulled out of. The first one I want to talk about is the systemic improvements. As I said, these improvements can be implemented across the entire high injury network within a specific locality. We could be looking at edge line treatment, curve delineation, flashing yellow arrows, and many others. The next category I want to talk about are the spot-specific improvements. So for the entire plan, we have about 43 spot-specific improvements identified. So these projects were tailored with VDOT and locality staff to really focus on the issues and considering the locality priorities and needs. The last thing I want to talk about today is the timeline process. So the application development can start as early as January 2026. We will be looking to work on project scope, cost estimates, obtaining resolutions of supports, should there be interested in moving forward with application, and many other things that we need from the checklist. We're anticipating the release of the NOFO sometime in March 2026 with the application deadline in June 2026. That's the end of my presentation. I would be happy to take any questions.
This is Brian, after the grant is awarded, how long for the actual construction phases?
It really depends. That's something that we will have to work with VDOT because ultimately VDOT is gonna be the one that kind of takes the wheel when it comes to construction. So, and it really depends on the projects. For example, the systemic improvements could take a lot less than the spot-specific improvements. But I think that the most important thing right now is to identify which projects the locality would like to apply for. That way we can talk to VDOT and get a better time frame and how much would it cost to implement the project like that.
The reason I asked is we have an intersection, which is already a dangerous intersection. But if we approve the power plant, then there will be even more traffic on that intersection. And we talked about bringing up for a roundabout. They did a study. They said it didn't qualify. I actually spoke to the VDOT regional engineer yesterday. Was it yesterday? Yeah, I think so. And asked questions about how something along those lines would work. Obviously, smart scale. But also the fact is that the power plant itself could proffer and build the roundabout themselves. So I was asking about whether that's some sort of a private-public partnership, what involvement VDOT would have, et cetera. It would be kind of time sensitive because if it is approved, they want to start building the power plant probably within the next 2 years is when the process would start. So the timeline there is something to talk about, but certainly I can get my planning director to reach out to you about that particular location. Because it would be a good, not only for economic development, but for safety reasons. It intersects with 53, but we get a lot of traffic from Buckingham traveling through there. So it's more a commuting corridor than is recognized, and it's a pretty hard blind right turn.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that sounds great. We're definitely looking forward to hearing from all of the jurisdictions about the interest.
So is it that if you did the regional approach, that each jurisdiction would still identify projects? And as long as they meet the criteria in this grant, it doesn't really matter what those projects are. So there doesn't really need to be alignment.
The projects have to be listed within the safety action plan that was adopted.
Right.
So
They have to be like, as long as they're within that, they don't have to be similar.
they do not have to be similar, and that's why we went into that case study work to make sure, do they have to be related projects to be a regional application, or can they just be different projects submitted as a multi-jurisdictional application?
And just so I understand, this isn't you submitting on behalf of an individual locality, this is a regional application. But all, if all
Yes.
6 want to participate, all 6 would be there. Does that limit each jurisdiction from submitting their own applications in them? And can the MPO submit one in addition to the PDC, in addition to the local?
As long as there's local support for it and the local match is good.
Yeah.
Which is one of the reasons we looked into the regional application, is trying to be more competitive. By if we have 2 or 3 jurisdictions interested, go ahead and submit them all together so they're not competing against one another.
They still get
They're
the
viewed as
projects.
one project
That
or
they-
one application.
And they probably still get the projects they'd want if they did an individual application. I like it.
So in this example that I just gave, is that something that we would reach out to you guys about? Just-
Yes, and we can help coordinate between your staff, VDOT, and our staff to figure out if that's something that you're interested in getting cost estimates and moving forward.
Okay.
Yep, and we have heard from several staff from several of your jurisdictions already inquiring about what the process would be, what the timeline is, how quickly could you get cost estimates so that it could go before governing boards, you know, prior to the application.
Do we have them reach out to Warren?
Yeah, you can reach out to any of us directly, we'll point you to the right people. Yep,
And this is totally separate from small scale.
this is not smart scale, that's correct, this is federal discretionary grant.
I mean, if you're expecting that there's something that could rise to the level of a smart scale application, you probably have a better chance of getting it funded through here than you will through smart scale.
And perhaps implemented more quickly.
Bars not really loud.
What's the name of the program again?
Safe Streets and Roads for All implementation grant.
It would still be VDOT administering the improvements though, right?
Say it again, I'm
It
sorry.
would still be VDOT administering the improvements.
Yes.
David didn't share the good news about transportation funding. What is that good news? There it is right there.
We sent a memo on this topic with all of the eligible spot improvements to all of your county administrators and CC'd all of the relevant either deputies, directors of departments, or planning staff that we had been working with in creating the safety action plan. So they've all received direct communication.
Could you just help us if you're not getting responsiveness from our jurisdictions to let us know that? Because if
Yeah.
we're voicing support here,
Yes.
or if we need to go back and communicate anything. Because we got a little slow start with some of us in this program to begin with.
And are you looking for any concrete direction or action from the commission?
Keeping you in the loop with the requests we're making of your staff to see if there's interest of your jurisdiction applying.
Yeah, I would just likewise say, I think, you know, Charlottesville City Council at least would certainly be interested in participating, finding that matching funding and being part of a annual application. And likewise, if there's not responsiveness from city staff, I think the city council would just let us know. Certainly, I think city council is interested. Are there any other questions or comments?
What's the level of matching funding?
20%.
Right. And can that be paid by the private entity?
It has to be non-federal,
Not federal.
that's the only thing it lists.
Considering it takes local matching anymore to get smart scale.
Well, if there aren't any other questions or comments, we can move on to the consent agenda. If there are not any amendments or questions about the minutes of the November 6th, 2025 meeting or the October financial reports, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Yes,
Is there a second?
there.
All right, motion and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Consent agenda passes. Moving on to this, the TJPDC Corporation.
Right. Make sure it's coming. There we are. All right, I wanted to take this opportunity to go over with you all tonight, some information about the TJPDC Corporation and what it is and what it does and who's on it. Some of you are on it and some of you have no idea what it is. And I serve as its executive director and secretary. So I just wanted to, bring this before you all to make sure you're all on the same page. Some quick facts. It is a nonprofit that is registered with the IRS as a 501c3. It's a charitable organization, and it is registered with states VDAX, which is through the agricultural department, where all charitable organizations need to be listed, and with the SEC as a corporation. It's tax exempt. It's not a political subdivision or an advisory board like the Regional Housing Partnership is. So that means it's not subject to FOIA. It doesn't have to abide by open meeting laws or sunshine laws. It's truly just a separate entity. Now, it does have an agreement with the TJPDC. It specifies, about the mission of the corporation, how that will mirror the mission of the TJPDC. It specifies board membership. The PDC will appoint 6 members, and 4 of them have to be current commissioners on this board. And it, lays out some information about like how the organization will function in terms of staffing, physical location, things like that. And it has a maximum of 13 members or directors on that board. So 6 are appointed by the PDC, but there can be additional ones just generally elected to that board by the existing members. And so we have actually a few like that. All right, some additional information about the memorandum of understanding with the PDC. There's this idea that there will be cooperative work on identifying projects and partners and funding sources. The PDC will make sure that appointments to that board are maintained. So occasionally I will come to you and say, hey, we need additional members appointed. Would you be willing to serve? And then this board would actually make those appointments. And then we do all of their financial record keeping and making payables. And then the corporation has to undertake activities that support the TJPDC's mission. So these, if you recall, the PDC's mission is to support our local governments, providing regional vision, collaborative leadership, and professional service to develop effective solutions for the region. The actual, and I'll go to I think it's on the next slide. The actual mission of the corporation goes into that in a little bit more detail, specifically calling out housing, environment, community development, transportation, workforce, and economic development, the arts, and universal design. It also specifically says that it will support the TJPDC by helping broaden the funding base for TJPDC initiatives and acting as an implementation arm for selected projects. This might raise a lot of questions in your mind of, well, what is the corporation doing? And how has it been used in the past? So I wanted to bring to you what the current programs are and what some previous programs are. So we have fiscal sponsorship, which is really just taking organizations that probably will be a nonprofit in the future and hosting them, managing their finances for them so that they can operate, but they don't have to go through a 6+ month process of becoming a 501c3. So Dementia Friendly Central Virginia is currently in that camp. They have a website, they're active, they have a bunch of volunteers, they maintain a lot of their own operations, but we handle their finances for them, and that's all we do with them. The Charlottesville Parks Foundation is brand new. They came online about a year ago, and they are extremely active. They have a bunch of volunteers. What they're doing is needed work in the city parks to help with things that city staff, or city resources are not able to keep up with, or some projects that residents would like to see happen, but aren't current priorities in the hub's plan. And so we have helped them figure out how to become a functioning organization, and we're working with them to, continue on down that path of like, how do you get insurance for your organization? How do you make sure that things are being run in a way that if you become a 501c3 in the future, you can meet all those requirements. And then we also run a number of current programs through the corporation on case-by-case basis, such as fundraising for the Central Virginia Regional Housing Partnership. When we host the summit, there are a number of organizations who really would like to contribute to that, but they want to make tax deductible donations. And if you do a sponsorship to a local government or a regional government body like us, that's actually not tax deductible. So it has to go to a registered nonprofit, which the corporation is, and then we have that contractual arrangement.
Well,
Okay. Sorry, thought I heard a comment. We have a number of previous programs, some that still are around and some are not. Here to Stay Wintergreen went off and became its own 501c3. They're very active. Seaville Village is also very active. Piedmont Sustainable Woods, I don't know if they're still active. I have not heard of them in the area. And then the Geriatric Collaborative of Central Virginia was extremely active for a time. We were their fiscal sponsor, but we also provided staffing and hosted events. And that, I believe, is not active anymore either. Because there's been so much activity with the Charlottesville Parks Foundation and other groups who have requested sponsorship, but maybe it hasn't materialized in the last 2 years. I have put together this fiscal outlook or financial outlook for the current fiscal year. So one interesting fact about the way the corporation is set up, it only generates revenue on the donations that are received by these organizations that would sponsor. And it's 2% of those donations. 2% does not actually cover a lot of the organization's expenditures for just administration. In terms of dollars, what I expect that 2% will be for this fiscal year is $200. Okay. Putting together this presentation probably took more than that in my time. The non-salary direct expenses that are anticipated are about $1,400. And you might be wondering why that's a large number. It's because they have to have their own set of 990s financial documents prepared for their IRS. They have to pay for D&O insurance for liability. They have to pay their registration fees for being incorporated. So all of that adds up. Salary expenses, $3,000-ish. So that's a net income that's negative. And they have some savings. Most of that was generated by the activities of the Geriatric Collaborative. Back in the day, we actually made some profit off of that. So I'm expecting our year-end balance to be half of what our savings is. Current directors and officers. So we have our TJPDC appointed folks, Mr. Reed, Mr. Pruitt, Mr. Smith, Mr. Goolsby, and Mr. Woodward. And then we have Genevieve Keller, who's a former TJPDC commissioner, former city councilor, planning commissioner. There we go. Who also was, I think when she was appointed, she might have been a current commissioner at the time, but she's still appointed as representing Charlottesville. And then we have our at-large folks, Sally Thomas, Christine and so what questions do you have, if any?
Ruth, could I add something?
Yes.
This, to give you all an example, our last meeting, all of our two meetings so far since I'm in virtual.
Yeah.
Was it Hawks Group the lady was from?
No, that was from the Charlottesville Area Alliance.
Okay, and somebody was willing to donate $2,000.
Yeah, that was AARP.
And, but I mean, they really had no structure. You know, it was just a group of folks that are kind of doing, trying to do really good things, you know, to be commended for that. So we kind of left it that if they could get some structure, maybe some bylaws and some officers and that type of thing, that, you know, and then come back to us. Because a lot of times the lead problem with smaller startup nonprofits have, if somebody's willing to give them money or something, they need a landing spot to hold that money. And, you know, I don't think that's what those folks were definitely looking for. So, you know, it's not tremendously exciting, but so far I've found that the people who can benefit from the good thing are really trying to do good things. So, and I think it's really good that our planning commission can help them get to maybe having generate that structure.
The
Incubator. Yes, right.
Harvest Foundation on one side and the Charlottesville Area Alliance on the other, I think are really good examples in what is a good candidate for partnership with the corporation and what is a bad. A less optimal candidate, right? Because the Area Alliance does not want to be separately incorporated. They want to continue to be informal. And they also have other, frankly, better choices for sponsorship. They are themselves composed of a bunch of nonprofits that can sponsor the grant. Whereas the parks, they need somewhere for their donors to get their write-off from. And they can't partner with their natural host, the city, because the city does not offer them that benefit. So this is like the nearest governmentally aligned corporation. I should know this because I served on it. The only context in which I'm familiar with this, are we ever needed to be like a signature or an actor on a grant because it needs a nonprofit or a corporate? Because I feel like I maybe did a vote on that once, right when I joined, but I haven't seen it as much, and we didn't really talk about it as much.
Yeah, there have been a number of instances where we've gone after smaller grants using the corporation, usually for supporting things like the Regional Housing Partnership or small initiatives like PATH.
Is that because there's like some kind of SBA component to it, like there's a preference to small businesses that governments can't fail?
It's usually because the grants that they're seeking are not eligible for governments to apply for. That only a 501, a registered 501c3 is an eligible applicant.
Yeah, so they're not like federal grants or state grants, they're private.
Foundation.
Oh, like foundation.
Yeah.
Any other questions or comments from the commission? One question, not knowing the history of this, when it was created, was the primary goal to be able to provide these kind of fiscal sponsorships in the community, or was there some sort of other motivation for its creation?
From what I can see, we're looking through prior minutes and activities of the corporation, it's really that and being able to do some projects in the community that normally you wouldn't see a government entity doing.
Does it feel like it's filling that mission adequately? Obviously, you mentioned that not a huge amount, but it doesn't break even.
Yeah, it doesn't break even. I think it's been underutilized by the PDC in terms of seeking funding opportunities. And I also think that the number of current organizations that we are sponsoring is low compared to the history. Either not a lot of organizations need that kind of support right now, or we're not well known or something, but we have had a few organizations reach out directly to us. We don't advertise.
And is your sense, is the reason for that just like staff capacity, like there's just not the time to prioritize this, or is it lack of like community awareness in terms of people in the community even knowing the system? So
Yeah.
I mean, we're listed, like the Center for Nonprofit Excellence, we're listed there as a fiscal sponsor, as an opportunity. So folks that are looking for nonprofit support can find their way to us. I think, at least previously, not now, previously, there was a real desire to help with the startup phase alone, but really anticipating that folks would then go and become their own. That the corporation didn't want to be long-term, like financial sponsors of organizations, because a lot of them, like you said, they might receive a couple donations, but they're not super organized and they're not super active. And so if we didn't see that they were like really finding their way, then there was a little bit of a risk that it would be a little bit of suck on staff time for something that could be spent in another area. If there wasn't a lot of funding coming in to support the programming of the TJPDC.
Thank you. Unless there's any other questions or comments,
Thank you.
we can move on to the next item, the 2026 calendar of meetings.
Right, included in your packet was a proposed calendar of meetings and the tentative topics at each of those meetings. I did not list on there intentionally which would be virtual or in person, as that might need to be flexible around things like weather, but knowing that the first meeting of the calendar year in February will be all virtual because of the building renovations. And then from there, you all can decide when you want to be in person or virtual, knowing that you can't do 2 consecutive meetings virtually. But we would love a vote on that calendar so that I can send out at the beginning of the year a calendar hold for all of your calendars for each of the upcoming meetings.
Is there a motion to approve the 2026 calendar of meetings?
So moved.
I'll second. All right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any extensions? Vote aye as well. The calendar passes unanimously. On to the next item, the executive director's monthly report.
Just a couple of items. I wanted to give you first an update on the building improvements, the tenant improvements. We have been in the process of doing all the material selection. We're almost complete with that. We have a walkthrough tomorrow with painter and contractor. We're very close to getting a 3D imaging of the kitchen of placement, and then we'll be able to pick materials for the kitchen. And then starting February, mid-December, we will be doing boxing up and moving of all personal effects, bookshelves, all of those things need to be put away so the movers can move furniture in order to replace floors. We have been given an offer from our owner, the owner of the building, that all of our things can be stored right upstairs. There's some vacant space so that we don't have to have storage units or anything like that. So we can just bring our items up there so we don't have to move them around through construction, which will save time, be a little bit more efficient. But we're pretty excited. January 5th is the kickoff day. Got a lot of last minute things that are going to need to be done, but really looking forward to having before and after pictures. Any questions on that one? All right, and then the other one is just an update. After our last commission meeting, under y'all's advisement, we did move forward with filing a complaint on your recommendation with the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, CFPB, against Wells Fargo for the handling of the check fraud and suspicious activity. We also filed a police report at your request. With the CFPB filing, we received an official letter from them that they had received the complaint and that they would respond within 10 days. We then got a phone call from our case manager asking for all of the relevant information and collecting the details. She indicated that they would likely be able to resolve it within 10 days. However, we received a letter, I think the day before Thanksgiving, that it said that they're going to need more time to do their research and investigation, and that we should expect to follow up by February 9th. So we are waiting to hear from the Wells Fargo end. On the police department end, we did file a report with the police department. They assigned us an officer who advised us to also file an online form complaint. That complaint was received and approved on November 18th, so it now has a permanent case number that's been issued. We haven't had further communication with the police at this point, but we do know that there is a case number they're working on. And then prior to filing both of those, we heard from Wells Fargo, who advised us that their fraud case had been closed and that they would make no further attempts to recover the missing funding. So I'm very glad that we went down the direction of filing that complaint, because now they have no choice but to go back.
Yeah, he is a good
Yeah.
agency.
Very much appreciate that guidance.
Their employees are dedicated, all four of them.
And that's all my updates. There's other written updates within the PD report in your packet.
There are not any other questions or comments. Move on to other business roundtable discussion. Start with Nelson County.
We got some more zoning discussion next week. Some people believe that 6 acre lot minimum sizes is a great number. I'm not one of those. That discussion is ongoing. And we will find out what happens in 2 weeks. But our zoning's not done yet anyway, so we're not gonna vote on anything in springtime. We had some pretty big discussions related towards the overlay of Livingston. I'm looking forward to seeing what opportunities it present itself. I want to call it the Libertarian's Dream Town, where you can run your business, live in it, and rent out your basement as a long-term, short-term, or some type of rental, all in the same building. So long as it meets your IRC and IBC standards, but we're really looking into mixed use in the village of Livingston, a limited space that we have to do anything. Of course, Livingston has had that mixed use for a long time. I just didn't know it needed the zone to actually say that. Moving on from there, water and sewer is actually becoming a bigger issue as we look at whatever ambitions we have into the future. Whether that's housing, commercial, etc. So we're looking at that pretty seriously and figuring out what capacity we can afford. The state did decide to take.
Or just models.
I mean, the world revolves around Livingston. You all just live in it. In case y'all didn't know, it's where the internet was invented. But it's basically going to be targeting the 29 corridor, that Livingston flat area all the way to high school and all that. Yeah, the state pulled about, it looks like $1 million from us after the whole, it's a thing called LCI.
Re-benchmarking.
Yeah, we're now going into re-benchmarking, which is worse. So that's been horrible. We're actually like we're like not far away from just the state minimum, where the state just pays us 20%. We far exceed everyone. I think y'all didn't get hit this year. How much did you?
I'm sorry.
Did y'all get hit on the?
Are we talking about
Positive index?
Yeah, we're getting help.
You're getting helped. Wow,
It's improving.
that must be nice.
Or it's going back to roughly what it was 2 years.
I have all the numbers if anybody wants to know.
Yeah, no.
Several in the region went up, you all went way up, several went down.
Yeah, wow, that must be nice. So we're getting hit again, and then we lost another 50 kids in our school population, so we're now in like year 10 of shrinking school population, actually year 20. Just in my tenure, our school population has shrunk like 15-20% in years. So we have some serious demographic situations that we have to address. Beyond the benchmarking, that's going to be a disaster for us. We did get our assessments done. That was spicy. Average of 25%. Some parts of the county got 50 and 60%. I will admit we are in a way better situation than your next door neighbors, Amherst County, that does their reassessment every 6 years, and all of their assessments went up close to 95 to 110%. So everyone says, can it be, when they start complaining to me, I'm like, it's just, hey, we don't live in Amherst, where your assessments literally go up 100%.
Well, you gotta sell your house in year 5.
So they actually do have pitchforks and tar. just south of us. So grateful we're not them. Fortunate we still have the assessment conversation, but we are probably gonna have some discussions about doing a little bit closer to a every 2 year model or every year model. That just seems like the.
Well, just, if I may, just thinking about that, because we were talking about the reassessment process, I mean, has a TJPDC ever thought of having an assessment board that they contract out?
I mean, it's
Because that's like, bringing staff, that's one thing. But that there's the housing of the staff, doing all those kinds of things. And maybe the level of staff that you would need in terms of economies of scale isn't really there. In other words, you'd probably hire 2 people, but you really need 2 people to, do an assessment of what the term of the place is. You're looking at, for Fluvanna County, it's $250,000 each assessment.
Same
something
for
like
us.
that. Same thing for another county. So for counties that don't have in-house staff, that may be a good way to make money for the TJPDC.
And that's a dependable revenue stream too, like. We've spoken to one of our neighboring counties about potentially partnering up if we did a every other 2 year cycle, as long as we were offsetting each other.
Yeah.
So that concept has already been played around in some localities.
Yeah.
Cause I don't know if we really wanna be in every year assessment county. I don't really think we do.
No, but every 2 years.
But every
you get
2
four-
years-
You get 4 counties to do that.
Yeah, there you go.
There you go. So, and I know Fluvanna would certainly consider it, because we're doing new commissioner revenue. And, there's some conversations around, whether we would bring that in-house or not, whether it makes sense to bring it in-house. Those are good opportunities to do that, but Jesse's point, if you got 4 localities, 1 year, each locality, you can do it in a 4 year cycle, and you can do administrative cycles. Now there's something called Eagle View.
Yep.
Which basically, spots, does a flyover type of thing, and.
Yeah.
And the Eagle View data is owned by the county if they pay for it. And there's probably a way to structure that so that TJPDC ultimately, just gives it, holds the data and goes from there, right?
Yeah,
So not.
that's a thought.
Worth
We're in
exploring.
your VAPDC executive director hat. Are you aware of other planning district commissions that do assessments? There's-
Well, I'm not aware of others that are doing it. I know there was one PDC within the last 6 months where, excuse me, the commissioners started talking to the staff about looking into the commission doing it. I think that was largely born out of frustration with, there's basically one entity in the entire state now that has a monopoly on doing reassessment. So I don't know where that landed. I haven't heard about those discussions for a couple of months. So that was Commonwealth Regional Council, which is Farmville and down southern central Virginia.
I will say we did get, we put it out for RFP, we got another response, which was lower than one, as everything out there, but it's still expensive.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Other than that, personal property tax assessments came back and. Everybody's pretty upset that their F-150s are worth more now than what they paid for 2 years ago. So that's all I got. I'm alive.
Well, I remember reading Amherst County held public comment only once a year, their board of supervisors meetings, so that's how they get away with the assessment.
That's a great strategy.
They can just get soared up.
Yeah.
Gotta bust all the public comments at once. Oh, I think the state government. For the state government, there's simply, you at least need to hold it 4 times.
That's awesome.
In any case, on to Louisa County.
Couple of things, the first data center, Amazon data center building is just about complete. They're moving servers in, should be online first part of January, they're saying. So we're excited about that. Then the reason that Mr. Barlow isn't here tonight, he went on the Santa train out of the Louisa Depot at 5 o'clock this evening. So, and I will share this with the Albemarle folks. My wife and myself were invited to go on the test ride. The Santa train and the Spirits train that they're also running for adults which I'll be on December the 19th. All of those sold out, say, the first did three days. Three, it was 19, 20, 21st. And those sold out before the first week. So they added 11 more of the spirits trains, and those are all sold out. They're running some of the salmon trains, they're running about 4 and 5 times a day. Now, they're only hour trips, spirits train and the salmon train. So I guess they go somewhere up next to us. Sure, that travels. But the one that we went on is to get ready for the next year run the dinner train, which is similar to what they run over out of Stanton. We run 2 of those, Stanton, one south and one that actually comes over the highway from Student Tunnel. So we came the hour and a half out. We got a tremendous view of the Shadwell Quarry. And it stopped before we got to the Rivan River. And there's a siding there. So they pulled into the siding, freight train went past. And the engine came from what had been in the front and came around to what had been in the back. So it pulls us back versus it pushing and pulling and whatever. So anyway, I thought that was interesting. So that's at least initially had their 3-hour trains would go, and then they'll add in some murder mystery trains like this. So if you look, if you have any interest in, you look at Virginia City Railways website, they're looking to do pretty much what they do in Stanton. So, but it's been extremely well received. A lot of good comments. I took a video when we were there the first day as the engine pulled up, and it was only 2 cars hooked to it. And I sent it to the chair of the board of supervisors, Dwayne Adams. He put it, I'm not on Facebook, so don't really understand anything about any of that stuff. I'm really happy. He put it on his, he asked me if he could put it, I said, sure. That was on Saturday. By Tuesday morning, it had 47,000 some views. He says that's really good. I don't know. As long as it takes 50 or more to go viral. I guess we didn't make that. But anyway, so yeah, we're really excited about this train. Of course, that's in the town, but you know, I think long term it's really going to be really something for the town. That's so.
Great. On to Greene County.
Very briefly, earlier this week, Greene got some good news about reservoir funding. I might let Tim elaborate on that because he's more tied into that situation than I am. I might remark that this very evening in Orange County, their planning commission held a public hearing on the formation of a new zoning category, the technology district. As you might imagine, this is designed to expedite the placement of data center anywhere in Orange. Now, Orange County does not have the access to abundant supplies of water that Louisa County enjoys. Indeed, like Greene County, Orange is highly dependent on drawing water from the Rapidan River. In fact, 2 years ago, Orange's Board of Supervisors asked the Rapidan Service Authority to increase the daily draw on the Rapidan by 1 million gallons. VDEQ denied that request. So I think it's prudent for Greene County to keep an eye on this development down in Orange, if only because Orange is downstream on the Rapidan from Greene. At some point in the next few years, we're going to be tapping the Rapidan to fill our reservoir. Should that coincide with the construction and operation of a data center in Orange, it could make for some interesting inter-county interactions.
He said somebody's gonna get towed.
Now, just an interesting inter-county interaction. That's a triple I.
That's great. Like, yeah,
I'm triple I you.
Goolsby, translate that for the rednecks.
I'll be coming down there. Talk to you.
Somebody.
It all runs downstream.
You know.
Yeah, we did get a $12 million grant to start with that water implement program, which we already had like 7 million aside for last year we got, so that's a good start to it. We actually do have a groundbreaking ceremony next Tuesday, ribbon cutting for the water inlet and the raw water line that starts all of it, so. And then the next phase is go ahead and start the construction of the reservoir dam. I think the last part of it, once all that's done, they're gonna redo a whole new water facility plant and everything, because the one there on 29 is outlived its age. For the last 20 years, they've been putting Band-Aids on it, keeping it going to. So it's a whole big project coming on down the pipeline. We actually implemented money from the county to start. County had 2 wells that they had dug previously and never actually brought them online. So now, with the last couple of summers of it being drought, we implemented money to go ahead and start those and get them online. That way, those drought season parts of it can actually put into service and help the county with the water supplies that we have now to keep it from going into severe drought part of it. Because even once they get the water line in and during the summer months, they're only allowed to draw so much water from it to pump back to the reservoir. So it's kind of, it could take 3 years before they, once it's built, 3 years to fully fill it. So, which we downsized the scale of it from where it was 9 foot to 6 feet. So it probably will feel quicker, but yeah, so it's gonna be designed to where another 20 years down the road, they can bring it up higher if needed in another 20 years or so. But that's a, I mean, I've been on the county seat now for 2 years, but that's been a thing with the Greene County for almost 25 years for the reservoir project, so.
Well, you're better, in a better position today than.
Yeah.
Or,
And it's right at the time, because it's a whole lot of developments there, you know, that's been in the waiting, more or less, to say to, you know, it was approved and, you know, for previous commissions that was approved and all, so now that all of them's kind of like waiting. Once the water's there, then everybody's gonna pounce. So, yeah. That's got the Wawa under construction, that's gonna be open, probably, I would say, right after, probably the first of the year, February, I'd look for that Wawa to be open. That's gonna help that cigarette tax revenue.
Thank you. Albemarle County?
And it's been kind of quiet. I mean, we started working on our our 5-year financial plan and financial management policies, getting ready for the budget. We met with Carlson Walker and the representative from Dean's office Monday for our legislative priorities session, and I was meeting the transportation drone funding issue again there. Coming out of VACO, wasn't real thrilled with any of their responses. One of our delegates said, "Oh, it's the first I'm hearing of." Well, so I appreciate everybody's support of sending a group letter over to them, and it seems like there were plenty of our colleagues at VACO that were also speaking to this matter and issue at different pressure points, from small rural type of road projects all the way up to really large projects. So every county is definitely feeling the funding issue. Saying that, at the NPO on the 17th, it's a virtual meeting still, correct? Or did we change it back to in person?
Virtual.
Is it still virtual?
Virtual, yeah.
At our request there, they're going to explain funding to us. So if you're interested in hearing VDOT explain how transportation funding works in the state, then that's a tune-in time, 4 o'clock on the 17th.
Wednesday. I've been advertising that to our colleagues on our board, but if you're interested in listening in with how it all goes and what they have to say, then that'll be a good time to do it. And I'll save our joint meeting with the school board from Mr. Pruitt.
Sure. So, just yesterday, we had our joint capital, priorities discussion with our school board counterparts. We meet with the school board twice a year during regular budget and then also later during, capital priorities. And I will begin by just noting, Albemarle does a by formula split every budget year, 10% into capital, and then about 2/3, 1/3 of schools county budget after that, which means, at least during my time of service, I've served for 2 years, it's been kind of a non-discussion, right? They give us their presentation of their needs, we hear them, and then we just execute the formula split every year. So it does not always feel like there's actually a discussion when we're sitting down with our school board counterparts. And just before I joined the board, we approved a pretty ambitious set of new major capital projects for schools. That includes 3 new schools, a new elementary in the south of the county, a new career technical center that's in the middle of the county and serves all of the county, and a new elementary school in the north of the county. That put our total debt leverage to about 7.5%, when included with other county capital projects, and of course we have a 10% threshold. Which I remember thinking, because I was at that point uncontested and was going to become a supervisor, I was like, oh, well, damn, they made all the decisions for me. That's going to prevent any new capital projects, essentially, for the entire time I'm serving on the board. And it does do for the most part. The schools came to us yesterday and requested a new high school. They said, this is our #1 priority. It had not previously been on the capital priority list at all. They had a 20 project list and it had just been added, which is very frustrating for several reasons, but mainly the messaging that we've been carrying, that we've been given by our school board counterparts, because I'm not going to contradict the school board on their own priorities. The message we've been taking to the community is that the technical academy is going to serve in place of a comprehensive high school by taking extra load from all the schools. That is beneficial because it meets our instructional goals, and it also prevents redistricting and can be, and they just came back and they're like, JK, it's not gonna work. It's not going to have enough of a load, it's not going to sufficiently offload them, and the community really wants a new school. And I'm like, great, the community's been telling us this for a long time, I've heard it a lot. We can't build it now because we've overloaded the capital plan. It's literally impossible. It is possible in a way that is almost like comically strange. It requires a 5-year planning outlook, saving, getting the tax authority that we want, exercising the tax authority that we want, them slashing their own budget voluntarily by a significant amount for 20 years, like all of that. And also freezing all future capital projects at their project. That is what it would take. Or just canceling the elementary school, which we didn't even talk about, right? I don't know why that hasn't been talked about, but like that would get you there. That and tax credit or the sales tax would get you there. It was the most animated meeting I've seen with the school board since I've joined, because we were actually talking about something substantive, because they came to us with a top priority. And we had to turn around and say, no. Well, not just no, but like, big dog, it's literally impossible. You're asking us to do something that I can't physically do. Again, unless we like literally slowed the budget for 20 years. So it was spicy.
The total ask for all their projects was 570.
$500 million. That's awesome.
Yeah.
We didn't list asking Louisa for money either. But
That's true. That's another thing that's on the table.
Well, no, that's the way it is. We're just gonna, we're gonna jump over Fluvanna. It just, thanks, Louisa.
It was a robust conversation.
It's a robust one. Did you see the most recent WIA article that came out of it? From the young guy who was there? The final quote at the end was frustrating.
He's been used to. That's public being better. I can say in Charlottesville, there's certainly a very unique dynamic with an elected board that makes budget requests but has no tax authority, and it's not gonna stop. Having said that, there's not anything else for Fluvanna County.
Well, apparently there's a picture of an excavating machine there at the corner of Zion's Crossroads where Wawa was finally breaking ground. For so many years, so
Everyone's getting a Wawa this year.
And when we did implement a meals tax, so that will help with the meals tax, we did have a conversation about. We just started the meals tax in August, I think. We're still giving a grace period to certain people to come on board. It's raised about $50,000 per month so far, but we know of several that have not complied or have not maybe submitted the revenues that they've collected or haven't collected the revenue, so we expect that to continue to grow. That's without the Wawa or cigarette tax too. So that's exciting news. We met with our schools yesterday as well too. We had the first sort of work session with them about the budget needs, small in comparison to some of the counties around here, but still a significant ask coming from them. They don't know the final number yet, of course, because they don't know what the state and federal monies are going to be, but it's going to be another big ask, and we'll have to address that as a county from that standpoint. Quiet before the storm because the Tenasca meeting's coming up in late January, plus we have another rezoning. That even though it's in the growth zone and even though it's just a rezoning, there's an active group of folks that are saying, oh, this is terrible. We can't have a garage next to us, God forbid. We can't have a housing complex. God forbid. You can't have solar, you can't have anything there, So it will be fun. In fact, last night we had somebody started during public comments talking about the upcoming Tenasca thing, and he was pretty animated, had to be escorted out to the room. So that's just a preview of things to come. It should be fun. That's about it in Fluvanna County right now. I will say that we did start a tradition at Baco. For those of you who didn't attend, we have a robust, very robust croquet tournament for
I didn't even know what that game was.
And now we can't stop thinking.
And I'm just gonna come out and say it, for some reason Fluvanna is really good at it. I don't even remotely understand how that's possible.
You know what school has a really big croquet culture? This is the Naval Academy. The United States Naval Academy has a huge annual croquet game that they play against St. John's next door. I find that to be the weirdest thing. At school. Boxing and croquet, those are the two big things. That's all I got. Right?
That's okay.
It's 100-year-old tradition because it was a suitable thing for young unmarried men and women to do together in public. And
We're just gonna. Wait a second.
You might be a dead ringer too. You're holding back on us, Bill.
Any non-croquet related updates from Charlottesville?
No, I mean, it's not. Take the,
It's good.
I had a whole page full of croquet related updates.
Now, a couple of football. You wanna go first? You want me to? Alright, so City IP rent wins its way. Mike and I will get back together on Tuesday. Public hearing for that. Part of that, I gotta say that procedurally we've gotten, and I'd love to hear your views on this, but over the last 3 years,
our actual physical ability and the procedural ability to look at what's happening as it's happening has gotten much better than it was. And we were warned 3 years ago that, oh, we've got this budget book and but it's kind of clunky. But it's an improvement, and both of those things were true. And then last year they actually figured out how to make it work, and it is way better because you're in this position, you know, of no longer having to be. It's like if you're reading a book and it's in Gothic print, so you're spending a certain amount of your brain trying to figure out what the letters are instead of reading it. Now you can just read. So that's been interesting and delightful. So there's that. We've got a broad initiative to try to do something about the relationship between environmental regulations, development, resilience, et cetera, that staff is working on, and they are starting from the broadest possible. Do we even know what our project is? Which was interesting to be presented on that. We've got yet another round of, we're working our way through the zoning code, fixing problems and updating. We've got public hearing on that early in the year, work sessions. And I don't want to steal any more of Mike's thunder.
No, it's been fairly quiet. Budget season, kind of initial meetings getting underway, and not that anyone here would have a desire to, but if you want to, there is that online budget book now that is much better in the past, and you can search. There's been updates where you can see where CIP projects that have been funded, where they are in their timeline. Engineering has been done, if construction started, and just a lot of things for, you know, good governance and transparency that weren't there before. Likewise, schools are going to be a big discussion topic. I think, as always, this budget cycle, our schools have had a request to renovate and update every single building in our school system, not all at once, but on a phased timeline. And they've tied that to the ability to do that sales tax referendum, if that went through, a plan for that. But it is interesting, our school population has been flat for over a decade. And so much focus on the school buildings. You don't hear as much requests about the people in the building in terms of teacher salaries, number of teachers, number of support staff. And I don't know if you see that, but it's an interesting dynamic. Kind of the buildings almost get more attention than people sometimes. But and other than that, I guess the next major thing that will be coming up is in January. We'll have a work session about zoning, about how student housing is treated in zoning districts, particularly in 10th and Page, Fightville, and Rose Hill neighborhoods. For those who aren't familiar, in summary, you know, after the new zoning, there is now zoning categories set in 10th and Page, Fightville, Rose Hill, which are historically Black working class neighborhoods. Right next to them and in them by right with no special use permits or Board of Architectural Review, discretionary review. 12-story buildings are allowed, and what that means in terms of market dynamics is the only thing that gets built is Hollywood student housing, because that's twice as profitable for person as non-student housing. So as you might imagine, there is a lot of anger about that fueling gentrification and displacement in those neighborhoods. So we're going to be having a work session to see if there's agreement on council that, you know, that specific issue was a mistake, and maybe there's some value to having discretionary review for large student housing right next to working class neighborhoods. But that's
I remember the meeting in Bloom, there was a either a district or an overlay that I think was titled something like historically sensitive community that was designed to capture that.
So for the
I'm just curious how that intersects with this problem.
I actually wrote that overlay, but go ahead.
Briefly, so the mixed use districts, like the X districts, allow that 7 to 12 stories by height, just fundamentally different.
a triplex or something like that. So in those larger areas, it wasn't initially in the zoning, but there was kind of, concern raised that this kind of thing could happen. So it was created, but it was only applied to some areas of West Main and Preston Avenue, but it was very limited in geographic scope. So where we're seeing these developed is all the areas where that overlay was never applied.
Right, and that overlay, there was sort of a debate on the fly as to what exactly where we ended up. There was some debate on how long to make it, and it also tears into, there's an overlay, well, it's not an overlay, it's a separate zoning category for those neighborhoods, Hampton Page, Pikeville, et cetera. That was designed to be a placeholder to provide some sort of protection against abrupt gentrification until we could have this conversation and figure it out, because we really didn't have a solution to push back against the density piece.
Did the end footprint of those neighborhoods, was it a data-driven process or a political driven process?
It was pretty arbitrary.
Was it? Sunshine James is built for it says at the end.
I mean, for example, the LV Collective project, which is the largest, is literally right next to West Haven, our largest public housing site. And it's built on a hill, so, overlooks it as well, so it was not data driven enough to catch all the money as public site.
And of course, that public housing site is where it is, was to be dropped below the level of Main Street so that it was out of sight. So it's a double tap. Yeah, here we are, 40 years later, 50 years later. Oh yeah, here's the second round. Which, yeah.
That's it for Charlottesville. If there's not anything else, then I will adjourn the meeting.
Oh, my balloon just got turned back on.
What's it?
Like.
Oh, good.